Hello fam, welcome back to the channel. So this is the part 2 of our previous tutorial that we did. So in this tutorial we are going to look at how to texture our pitch, our basketball pitch, and then our basketball, and then we are also going to look at some lighting techniques so that we get some aesthetic or some quality looks for our final render. So make sure you like and subscribe, then leave your comment in the comment section below in case you have any thoughts or questions. So let's jump right into it. So for this texturing part, we're going to start texturing of our pitch, and then we're going to texture our basketball, and then we're going to texture our hoops that we have here. And then after that, we're going to look at how to add basic lighting to our scene to have quite a nice render. And then we're going to look at how to render only the basketball with some quite effective lighting to give it an aesthetic look. So without further ado, let's start our texturing. So let's go to the shading tab over here, and then let's come to the solid view here. So we want to separate our scenes over here, so we can be viewing our render over here while we do the texturing and the lighting on this side. So we can also disable these gizmos and the outlines. So for our pitch, let's go to the rendered mode over here, and then we can change it to cycles. So we want to see what you're doing. So for now, let's just come here and then disable the scene mode so that we get a bright light to see what we are doing. And then we can change the strength to something like 0.5 so that it's not too harsh. Okay, and then we can come to this render settings and then come to this film. We don't need this background over here, and check transparent to clear our background that we are seeing over there. So we can still reduce the strength, it's too harsh. Okay, so now for our basketball course, we don't need this texture because, as you can see, we can't use this as our final texture since you have the measurements on it. So we have to recreate the texture. So we are going to start from the base. Let's select this texture over here, image texture, and then delete it, X to delete. So we start on a new surface. So let's add a brick texture. I'm going to start with a brick texture, and then let's view our brick texture. So to view this, you hold down the Control and the Shift key, and then you left click on it. So in order to be able to do this, you have to go to the add-ons and enable your Node Wrangler. Add-ons and then enable Node Wrangler. Make sure it's enabled. So that's how you can hold on the Control Shift key and then preview our texture. So we have to make a few changes here. So let's change this frequency from 2 to 1, and then we can change the squash to 2. And then we come down here and then change our mortar size to 0. We don't need the mortar, so we just out it, and then we can come to this row height here, change it to 0.12 exactly, and then we can change the break range to 1. So that's all the changes we need to do for this break texture. So that's all the changes we need to do. So now let's color this. So for that one, let's bring in our color ramp. So converter color ramp, and then place it in between, and then we can change the colors. For this black color, you can change the hue to something like 0.07, and then you can change the saturation to 0.77, and then the value can also be actually something closer to the same. Okay, and then for this white color, change the color to something like the hue, something like 0.6. Then let's change the saturation to 0.7. Yeah, I think, yeah, something like this. And then Shift A, and then we come to color, and then add hue and saturation. Then we're going to reduce the saturation a bit to something like 0.8. I think 0.8. Yeah. So that's it. So you can see, change the saturation. So that's it for the base of our pitch. So now we have to add our markings. The lines and the other drawings, the center line. So for that one, we already have a pre-made image texture. So the textures, all the textures we're using for this project, and the link in the description below, so you can download it and use it. So Shift A and then bring in your texture. Shift A, go to image texture, bring in your image texture here, and then open our texture that we'll be using. So as you can see, if you preview our texture, this is a basketball texture, and it already matches our field. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this as our factor for this hue and saturation. No, we actually add another node. So Shift A to add another node. Go to color and then mix color. So we're going to mix these two colors and then use this as our factor. So as you can see, our markings is now showing, but it's not clear enough. So what we can do is change the value to 2, and then we can now clearly see our markings as we need them. So that's it basically. So you can preview and then connect this to the base color. Then let's change the roughness to 0.3. So that's it for our page texture. So now let's come to the basketball. Select your basketball, and then for this you can isolate it, /key. So now let's texture our basketball. So for our basketball, we're also going to add some basic texture for our basketball. Let's add a new material for our basketball. And then the first the texture we are going to be adding is our Voronoi texture. So come here and then add in your Voronoi texture, preview, and then you can change the scale roughly to something like this, and then Shift A and then bring in your color ramp. So bring this closer to each other to increase the contrast between the black and white. And then let's come to the Voronoi texture and then reduce the randomness. Move it down. Let's move it down. Okay, to something like this. So we want to create this dotted texture on our basketball, just to increase it to something like 100. Okay, but you can see that we are having this spiraling on our ball, and it's not going to look good on our ball. So what we need to do is change our coordinates. So select this Voronoi and then press Ctrl T for your mapping and your texture coordinates. So Ctrl T is enabled, is usable because you have our node wrangler. Make sure that you enable your node wrangler to be able to do this. So let's change this from the generated to UV. So we are going to be using our UV coordinates to project this. So for this, you can go back to solid view, then go back to your edit mode. So let's also change this side to our UV editor, so we see what you're doing. So with this same lines that I've selected, this edges that I've already selected, you press Ctrl E and then maxim. So after that, you also select everything again and then U to unwrap, and this is the texture or the UV map that we are going to be getting. So this is how we want our UV map to be. So we can go back to the object mode and then preview our render. So we can still change the scale, increase it to be more. So we can see that it's now cleaner. We now have cleaner. We don't have any spiraling going on. So this is what we want for our basketball. Okay, so you can still increase the dots, and we can still tighten this a bit to add more contrast. Okay, so this is good. So what we are going to do with this is we are going to add bumps. We are going to make the texture of our basketball bumpy. So Shift A and add in a bump node. Let's preview it, and then let's connect it to the height. So that's not what we want. So we can invert it to get our texture. Okay, so you can tweak it a bit to actually go for what you're looking for. Let's move it up and down just like this, roughly. Then let's reduce the size or the strength of our bump. Let's just reduce it something few. It shouldn't be so harsh. Okay, something like this, and then we can now connect it to our normal. So we can now see this bumpiness on it. We can still reduce the strength a bit. Okay, perfect. So now let's add our color, our basketball color. So what we're going to do is Shift D, select this, duplicate, and then we're going to connect this, and let's preview this. And then let's change the color for this black roughly to a dark orange color. So something like this, and then we can also change this to something closer, but it's much more. Let's just change the brightness. So something like this is okay, and then let's connect it to our base color. Okay, so this is good. So let's create the black texture for our lines in between. So go back to your object preview, select, hold down your Alt key, and then select this edge loop. So after I selected one edge loop, press Shift G and then select similar, and then we are going to select no, we have to go to the edge select mode. So while we're in the edge select mode, we press Shift G and then select seam. So it's going to select all your seams across all the seams that you have, and then hold down your control and then press the numpad plus key to select this, and then come here and then add a new material and then assign it. And you can see that we have a different material over here. So add a new material, and then we're going to add a basic black color for this. So that's it. So that's basically the texture for our basketball. So basically done with our basketball. So what we can do furthermore is we want to add a logo, maybe a Spalding logo or something, and then the NBA logo. So what we can do for this is we are going to texture paint our logo on it. So let's come here and then create a new texture, image texture, and then we can create a new texture, and then maybe you can see ball logo, something. You can name it anyhow you want to remember. And then let's change this to 2K. So I want to change this to 2K, and then enter. So we create a new image texture over here, and then we can come and then preview our texture over here like this. So you can see our texture that we just created is all black, but no need to worry, we're going to do texture painting. So for the texture painting, let's go make sure this ball logo is selected, and then come to the texture paint mode. Let's isolate our ball. So what we are going to do next is our texture is black, so we need to fill out this to be white. So what we are going to do is we come to this texture tab here, add a new texture, and then change our paint out to a fill brush, and then we are going to change this. We have the black here and the white here, but anytime you see the color that you see here is the active one, so that's what we'll be using for this. So we want to change this black to white, so the shortcut we are going to use is X. You see, anytime I press X on the keyboard, they switch places, so now the white becomes the active, and then when I click, I get the white filled into my black texture. So that's what we need to do. That's the first step. So now let's go to our side view where we are going to be putting the logo, and then we can open our properties menu and then come to this tool, and then for this, let's change this back to our paint hard brush. And for this texture that we've created, let's open our logo that we have, that we are going to be using, the Spalding logo. So we now have our texture, and then let's come to this texture drop down, and then change it from view plane to stencil. So you can see that we have our texture here, and then click on image aspect to have the correct ratio. And then what we can do is, if you right click, hold down your right mouse and then drag, you can move your texture around. And then if you hold down the shift key and then hold down your right mouse button and then drag, you can scale it. So you can move it with your holding down your right mouse button, and you can scale it holding down the shift and the right mouse button. So that's basically it. You can move it around, something like this. Something like this is okay. So this is how I want it, and then hold down your left mouse and then paint our texture onto our basketball. So that's it, and then we can add the NBA logo over here. So we come back to this texture tab here and then change our logo. Then we have it, and make sure that you change the image aspect also to get the correct proportion, and then scale it down, and you can move it towards this place. I think something like this is okay. Roughly center it, and then just paint over it. So that's it. So we now have our logo that we want to use on our basketball. So let's go back to our shading tab and then change this to the texture preview. Okay, we're in the texture preview. So you can see our texture that we've created here in our UV editor. So you make sure that we have to save this as an image texture, or anytime you close or your Blender crashes and you don't save this image, you lose it. So you have to redo everything again. So in order not to lose our image, you have to save it. So make sure that you come to image, then save as, and then find maybe a folder that you can save the texture in. So you just want to save and then enter to save as image. So we now have our image texture secured. So let's go to the rendered mode. So you can see we are not seeing our texture in the rendered mode, so because we haven't connected it to anything yet. So what we are going to do next is, you can move everything backwards a bit. We are going to add a color, mixed color as usual, and then we are going to connect this as the factor. So we connect this as the factor here, so you can now see the effect you are getting. So you have it the opposite way, so you just change the connection, and then we now have what you want, and then change this white color to a black color. So that's it. We've now added our logo, so you can add any branding that you want. Maybe it's your name, or you have a branding that you want to add to your ball. That's how you can do it. So what you can do again is, let's duplicate this and then bring it here for our bump node, and then we can connect this as a factor. So you can see it's going the wrong way, and then come here. So that's it. And then you can change this to white or black. Let's change it to the white in order to get it to sink in, to be etched inwards, so we don't get this bumpiness inside our writing. So this is what we want. So that's it for our basketball. We're done with our basketball texturing. So what we're going to be texturing next is our hoops. I want to add very basic textures to it, nothing too much. So let's select this hoop here and then isolate it. So for this, we are just going to let's add a new texture. We're just going to make it a black texture. Let's change it to the black texture. So you can see that it's applied to everything, but I want to change this to something like white. So add a new material and then go to the edit mode. Select this and then assign this material to it. And then go back to your object mode. And then you can add a new material. You can change the color a bit to anything that you want. And then for this board, let's select this board. You can add this black material we just created. And then we need to change the orders. So go to your edit mode and then add another material. And make sure that you select these two faces. Go to the face select mode. You want to change our two faces here. Add a new material and then assign it. I want to also add a different material to this little one here. So select that one to add a new material and then assign. So we now have three different materials for our backboard. Okay, so for this material, which is this one, we're going to create a new material. And then what we are going to do is I'm going to drag the metallic all the way to 1. And then I'm going to change the roughness to 0.1. To give it a reflection, we want to do a glass backboard. Okay, and then Shift A to add another shader. Let's add a transparent shader. And then Shift A to add the mix color node. Mix shader. And then put it in between this and then connect our transparent. So this transparent is going to allow us to see through our transparent glass over here. So that's basically what we need. And then the last node we can add here is a Fresnel node. Shift A and then input, and then you can add a Fresnel. And then let's preview it. And then let's change the IOR. So you can change the IOR to let's see, something suitable. Okay, so you can change the IOR to something like 0.8. Then connect it as the factor. So that's it for our backboard over here. And then let's texture our hoop over here. Add a new material, and it's just a basic orange material. So that's it. That's all we need to do. Maybe you can. Okay, let's just leave the roughness. So that's it for our hoop and our basketball, our basket and our holder. So you can come back to your scene, and we can see that after we've textured this, it's going to affect the ones on the other side. So we don't need to do any texturing for this one. So that's all we need to do. So for our pitch, we want to add another layer of blue over here. So let's select this floor over here. Go to the edit mode and then select everything and press I to insert. Or you rather add an edge loop, Control R, add edge loop, and then scale it. Nope. Select this. So go to the face mode and then select these faces and then add. I want to add a new material. So let's go back to the object mode, add a new material and then click new. Now I'm going to add another material and then go back to our edit mode and then assign this material over here to this part that we selected. And then go back to your object mode. So let's preview this and then let's add a new material. So for this material, we just want to change it to a basically blue color. You can change something like this. No, something like this. Okay, then let's change the roughness to 0.3. So that's basically the texture we just need for this. So we basically done with the texturing. All the important things are texturing. So now let's look at the basic lighting we can add to have an aesthetic scene, because we don't need to use this lighting. This lighting is not good. So let's disable the scene world over here. So we are back to a dark background. So before we do our lighting, let's add a camera. So Shift A and then add a camera to preview. So you can use the numpad 0 to go to a camera view. So let's set up the camera. So you can preview this scene like this and then hold down your Control Alt key and then numpad 0 to capture our view that we have. So now we're in the camera mode. So let's change this to the 3D viewport and then let's view the camera over here. And we don't need to be rendering all this here. So what we need to do is Control B and then draw across this to view only the things that we can see in the camera. So let's also disable this 3D scene here. Okay, so what we can do for this is let's enable the gizmos. So you can see if you scroll up and down, our camera is just moving in and out, but we want to be able to change our view from the camera view. So let's lock this, and then see when we scroll in and out, you can now change the view of our camera to what we want. So what we're going to do next is we can add a wall around our field. So select this, go to the edit mode, and then select the edges around. Let's extrude it, E to extrude on the Z axis, and then select this face and then delete this face over here so we can see through our camera. So we can select this camera and then scale it up. Let's change the pivot point to medium point, and then we can scale it up so that you can see it properly in our viewport. You can scale it up so that you can see where our camera is. Okay, so now let's start adding our light. So for our lighting, the first light we're going to be adding is an area light. Shift A and then add an area light. So for this first lighting, let's go to the front view, and then I want to move our light here and then rotate it. So we're going to change a few settings for our light. So you can see we are not seeing the effect of our light here because it's not bright enough. So what we can do is come to this light data here, and then we are going to change this shape from square to rectangle, and then we want to change this measurement from inches to feet. So let's come to the scene here, units from inches to feet. Come back to our light properties, and then let's change the X to 20 feet and then the Y to 40 feet. So we are going to get a rectangular shape, and you can see that our light is now bigger, but it's still not brightening our scene. So what we can do next is change the power from 10 to 2000. Okay, so now you can see it's now brightening our scene. So that's basically the setting we need for this light. So what we're going to do next is we want to duplicate this light around so that it's going to fill our whole scene. What we are going to do is let's go to the top view, and then we are still going to change this. We are going to use our 3D cursor as the pivot point, and then we are going to duplicate this light. So we don't, instead of using Shift D, we are going to use Alt D to duplicate. So any changes we make to one will affect everything. So Alt D and then R to rotate, and then 90 degree. So rotate is 90 degree using the 3D cursor as our pivot point, and then you can press Shift R to repeat the action, and then Shift R. So we now have 4 different lights lighting our scene. So you can see this light is behind the wall and we are not seeing the effect here. So we can come and select this wall and then move it on the Y axis and make sure that our light is in our scene. Okay, so we can see that we've now lit up our whole scene. And then let's add another light. Shift A, and then we're going to add another area light. So this we are going to keep in the middle, move it up a bit, and then we are going to change this light. We are going to change the power to 1000, and then we are going to change the color to something like this, reddish, to give it some effect, just to give it some effect. So that's basically the lighting we need. So let's change the colors of our wall. So select this wall here and then go to the material preview. So you can change the color, make it a bit darker. Let's change. So it shouldn't necessarily be white, and we don't want this floor to be the same color as the wall. So you can go back to our edit mode and then hold down the Alt key and select these faces, and then add a new material and then assign. So we can leave it like this. So the floor can be white and then the walls can be something like this. So that's it for our lighting. So if you go to our camera view, number 0 to go to our camera view, you can set the view that we want to render from, something like this. So you can roughly set something like this. Okay, I think this is good, so that we capture our full cut anyhow you want to capture. So I think something like this is good. So now we can render this scene. So if you want to render this scene, you can make a few render settings. So you come to the render tab here, and then for our samples, you can change the maximum samples to something like 50. Shouldn't be nothing crazy. And then you can come to this light part over here and then change the total light bounces to 4. And then we can disable the reflective and refractive. So that's basically, this is the settings that I usually do for my renders. That's basically the settings you need to do for a render. So now you can render this scene out. F12. I use the F12 key to render this scene out. And then you're going to get your beautiful render for the basketball scene. Okay, so now we want to light our basketball. We want to create an aesthetic lighting only for a basketball, maybe for a promo or an advertisement. So now let's create the lighting for this basketball. So we don't need to use these lights. So you can select all these lights and then move them into a collection. Move and then create a new collection, and then maybe you can name it floodlight. So this one is our floodlight. Beautiful. This is our floodlight. So you can hide it anytime you want. So let's hide this floodlight here, and then we want to maintain this scene here. So we are going to do this. Come here, select our camera. Where's our camera? We select our camera. Okay, then come to these properties and then add keyframes to our location and then rotation. So come here and then press I to add keyframes to our rotation and location. And then you can move forward to something like 20 and then add another keyframe to location and rotation. So after this, we can now enable this auto keying. So make sure this auto key is enabled, and then we leave our timer on the 20 mark. And then if you go to our camera view, any changes we make, you see we still don't lose our first scene. So if you go to the beginning, we have our first keyframe that we set for this scene, and then we still have this one also, so we don't lose our first scene that we created. So now we want to light only the ball. So let's bring our focus to the basketball. Let's select the basketball we have here. Then you can use the number pad period to move closer. And let's go to the side view, number 3 to go to your side view, and then select our camera, and then hold on the Alt Control and then 0 to get this scene in our camera. So now you can set up the scene that you want. So over here we can rotate our camera and move it how you want it to be. So let's rotate it. So we don't need in the 3D color. Let's change the pivot points to median points, and then we can rotate it up a bit so that we get this view of our hoop over here. And we can move it down a bit. We can move it down a bit. So we need the basketball to fill in more space over here, so we can scroll it up to bring it closer, and then we can move down our camera a bit, so we can rotate it up some more to get the view. Then we can move it down a bit. I think we should rather rotate it like this, then move it up. Okay, we're just trying to get a rough placement so that we can see both our camera and our basketball and our hoop. Rotate it a bit. Okay, move down a bit. Okay, so something like this is good. So this camera setting is good, so we can unlock it so that we don't accidentally change our view. So now for the lighting, let's first add Shift A and then add an area light. So for this lighting, let's move it up a bit, then rotate it like this. So we are going to put it behind our basketball. So this is going to be the rim light for our basketball. So we are going to create a rim light for our basketball. Move it closer to the basketball so that we're going to get this effect. And we don't want this light hitting here, but before we do anything, let's duplicate this. But before that, let's change a few settings. Come to the light settings over here. So for this light, we want to change this spread. Let's reduce the spread to something like 50, so that we're going to get a much more hard light around this. So you can see that our light is much more harder and it's creating the contour that we need. So this is the effect that we need for our ball. And then you can change the size, something like 2, to soften it a bit. Yeah, so that's basically what we need. That's basically the changes that we want to do. And then we can change the power to 50. Change the power to 50. And then for this light, we don't want it to be bouncing on our floor. So we don't need all this bouncing, all this effect here. So what we're going to do is select this basketball and then select our light. And then I'm going to press Shift L. I think Control L. Sorry, instead of Shift L, we're going to use Control L. And then we come to this link receivers to emitter and then include. So now the light is going to affect only the basketball and it's not going to affect the ground. So this is called light linking. So we are linking this light only to affect this basketball. So that is what we need to do here. Now let's duplicate this light. Go to the top view and then Shift D to duplicate the light. So before we duplicate it, let's change the pivot point to 3D cursor. So Shift D and then rotate it 90 degrees. I think we selected it with the basketball, so we select only the light, go to the top view and then Shift D and then rotate it 90 degrees. Rotate it 90 degrees to bring this light on the other side. So for this light, we can now disable the light linking. We want it to affect our ground, so you can come to this properties over here. You can come to this image object properties here, and then you can come to relations. I think shading rather. You can come to the shading and then drop down the light linking, and then we're going to remove our light linking. We don't need this light linking over here, so we can leave this light to affect the ground. But we are going to reduce the brightness. Our light is too bright, so let's reduce the brightness to 10. So this is brightness okay for us, and then we are going to increase the size of our light to 3 to soften it a bit. So that's all the settings we need to do for this light. And then we are going to duplicate this light, Shift D, then scale S, and then -1 on your Y axis to move it to the other side. And then change the pivot point to median and then scale Y -1. I think this is not the direction we need, so let's delete it. Let's select this light again, Shift D, and then rotate it on the Z axis 180 degrees. Sorry, let's change the pivot point to 3D cursor, then rotate it 180 degree on the Z axis. So with this light, we are going to change the power. We don't need it to be too bright, so we are going to change it to 5. And then we are also going to change the color to something blue, bluish light. So that's it for this light over here. So you're basically done. We just need to add a few more lights. So the other lights we need to add, we come to this hoop light over here. Sorry, the floodlight, enable our floodlight over here. And then we're going to select this light over here. I'm going to select this and then this, and then Shift D to duplicate, and then we're going to move it out of this floodlight, and then we can now hide. So we now use this, only this and this light for our basketball lighting. And then the last lights we're going to be adding, Shift A, add another area light, go to your front view and then wireframe, and then we're going to rotate 90 degrees and then move this light over to our wall here. So we can move it to this wall, and then we are going to increase the size of our light here to something like 20. Yeah, I think 20 is okay. And then we increase the strength of our light to 1000. Okay, so our light will now affect this wall, and then it's going to give it this effect over here. We can move down our ball a bit so that we make sure that it's sitting on the ground. Our ball should be sitting on the ground. I think let's change this so that we see what you are doing. Material. So our basketball is going to be sitting on the ground. Hopefully. Maybe on the Z axis. Okay. So that's all. So that's it for our final lighting. So for our final render, to add more effects, let's select our camera and then come to this camera properties and then enable your depth of field. So with the depth of field enabled, we want to keep our focus on our basketball. So click on this focus on object, click on your eyedropper tool and then select your basketball. So the focus is going to be on your basketball, but our background is going to be blurred. So that's the effect you want to create for our lighting. So that's it. That's our final lighting for our basketball. And then all you need to do next is F2 and then F12 to render, and we have our final render going. So with a little bit of tweaking and some settings, we can actually get a final render, a very beautiful render of our scene. So if you like this tutorial and you would like to see more educative tutorial such as this, subscribe to the channel and make sure you leave a like for the video. And you can also leave your thoughts in the comment section below. So catch you in the next one.